A warm welcome to all our viewers to our series Meaning of Life. What was first, character or personality? I'll examine this question in a moment with my guest today, the neuroscientist Josua Kohberg. Stay tuned. Hello Josua, welcome. Hello Rolf. The chicken and egg question applied to character and personality. What was first? Is one possibly the basis for the other? I'd actually put it this way. For me, the big difference between character and personality is that the character depicts the base. So that means that a person who experiences themselves in the course of life will find that they have a character which reflects certain strengths, certain weaknesses and certain risks. And personality is like, let's say, this more modern version that picked up speed sometime in the 1920s, 30s, where people thought, how can I train my personality? How can I communicate better? Or things like that. And the personality is based on the character. Do I understand that correctly? That's actually how I see it, yeah. Also, a bit from the view of our brain. So, we have, if you look at the development of our character, we have several factors. On the one hand, there are inherited character traits, which according to neuroscience is currently around 20%. And then we have 80% so-called epigenetics, that is, influences that come from outside. So parents, culture, teachers, friends, so all of this shapes us in our behavior and also in our personality. The character, on the other hand, is something much, much deeper. The character is what really sets us apart in the basic structure. And I always try to make an example with a nice picture and to say, when a person is born, then they already have a certain imprint. That's simply given. But actually the field is actually still very free. So this field of all possibilities. And let's take as an example that I would now have a child who's born here in Switzerland. Immediately after birth, it's brought to an African country and an African child to Switzerland immediately after birth. Then the child would still be African or Swiss in terms of structure, but through epigenetics it would be able to deal with certain things. So the Swiss child might be able to walk barefoot in the sand. It would have the opportunity to find a source of water through intuition. And the African kid growing up here would be okay with cars, with cycling, with traffic, and with a school like the one that takes place here. But it would always remain an African in its basic character, even if it might not recognize it at that moment, just as the basic character would always be a Swiss. That's not totally exactly right now, but just so you can understand the direction a bit. Well, that means that it's basically already in place for me at birth. I bring that on the spiritual level, for example. I bring that into life. And then it's about discovering the character or the characteristics, living them out, and that in turn fuels the personality and personality development. So very, very complex. Absolutely. And anyone who is a parent of any kind and has more than one child knows this. That means you have 2 or 3 children and they're completely different, even though they are in the same family, growing up in the same culture and so on. And yet we often have completely different people. And that's actually a character issue, and of course the character is further developed in epigenetics. And so let's say I have a structured child. If it's recognized early enough that this is a strength, then this strength is further developed in the imprinting from the outside, and vice versa. things where the child is not so strong. We already looked at that with another topic with coaching, with the unconscious, that one should be looking for another way. And what I took away from our programs, and see here again, that it is probably always about promoting strengths, recognizing them as a parent, and later when I grow up, to recognize and develop them myself. Exactly. There are also these so-called character-building measures. I'm not talking about education now in a positive context, youth detention centres, or, for example, in the military, and of course setting goals, which is different. But character-building measures, that something like that is set up, is that even possible, or is it just conditioning that doesn't really work? Well, of course, it's possible to press people into certain forms. But these people will never be happy with it and never ramp up to full potential. Perhaps I'd like to bring the subject of character building a little closer in the way I got to know it, because in fact it is the case that in the last century, up to 1915, 1920, character building was reduced to one point. And this point, we know it as the Golden Rule. There's a statement by Jesus, but it's from the Middle Ages. It's attributed to different people or different cultural eras, that only what I want happening to me, I do to others too. So a very simple core principle. And then when we started to get into this topic of personality training, and also this is completely value-free, I'll name a model now, and there's an incredible amount of positive things about the model. But let's take the NLP model. Suddenly we were interested in how can I, for example, take specific measures in a conversation and lead another person to where I want them to go, for example, as a seller. And that's a classic personality training. That means I train myself in communication in order to achieve something that I want. And in fact it is, and as I said, completely value-free. It's all good, it has a lot of positive starting points, and yet when I reflect back on the character, the really highest form of character building would be to find out what is my real strength. What is my sound that I carry into the world? And if I can bring this sound into the world, then I can create further harmony with others, in the sense of an orchestra with different sounds. And suddenly we would have people who are happy where they are, who are happy with the other person, who is happy where they are, and where a harmony in the big picture develops from it. And I'd like to add a picture, just so that you understand what I mean by that. Why it's so important to look at the character. For example, we have people who fall into different tones, who are very, very social. So people who are strong in caring for the elderly, who deal with disabled children, who do almost everything to make things better for other people. A great weakness of these people is taking care of themselves. That's why we have an absolute imbalance in our care systems. This means we take advantage of these people because they're unable to ensure that they are paid an adequate salary. If we now had a management in a nursing home, just as an example, where the management is structured in such a way that it cares about money, has a high ethical approach and says, we all want to be adequately and well paid here, me as management, but also the people who care here, and also to treat all the people who live in our house here humanely. Then we would have a house full of harmony, and with that, human ethics. That would be the idea I would express as character building. You have now linked a very current topic. And I thank you for pointing this out, for these remarks. They're really very nice. Well, it touches me too. One often speaks casually. They have a good character, they have a bad character. Does that exist at all? So I wouldn't put it that way because, of course, everyone has a good character from their perspective. There are, of course, people that both of us would evaluate from our point of view and say, I don't find this a good character trait, but that is, again, only our point of view. The imprint, or this basic imprint of the character, there are also tones, for example. We go by tones. We also wrote this book, Harmony. That's sort of our basic work on it, exactly. And in the book, we break it all down. For example, there are sounds that socially committed people would now describe as antisocial. I'll take a very simple example. We have two executives. One manager is very, very people-oriented. This person, for example, if they now had a company with 1,000 employees, and this company would be doing badly, then they wouldn't fire anyone for as long as possible, even at the risk of the company going bust. Now, you can say that sounds like a very good character. So now that would be one perspective. On the other hand, we might have a manager, also an entrepreneur, also with 1,000 employees, who also gets into trouble and would lay off 300 people. But it would save the company. Now, you might say from the perspective of a normal person, but that's not a good character. They fired 300 people. Now, you always have to weigh up, and the person who laid off is a good character from their perspective because they have the numbers under control because they run the company. But others see it the same way and say, honestly, I don't care about the company, I want people to be saved. And both have advantages and disadvantages, so every character always has two sides. The greatest strengths are usually the greatest weaknesses, flying in our shadows. And the fascinating thing is, when we talk about character building, when I realise what kind of character I am, I'll give you a very simple example from my life. I'm a people-oriented guy. For me, I like money too, just so we understand each other properly. I like to go out for a nice meal, I like to drive a nice car, I have a nice house. I really like all of that, but if things get tight, I would just give all the money away so that I can somehow save 10 more people. Now, this is, of course, a problem from an entrepreneurial point of view, and that's often been my undoing in the last 30 years, although I've always believed I'm right. I compensated for that, for example, by having alongside me as an assistant and project manager a young lady who is extremely structured and number-oriented. And we both match each other. So that means she warns me early enough, Joshua, something is going in the wrong direction now, and we have to react. And so I have the opportunity to perceive my blind spots. And through the combination with me, she also has the opportunity to look at her blind spots, and thus we make a whole. And that's what I would just wish for people to be in tune with themselves and others. And that's also the idea behind the book, to say, what is my tone and what is the tone of the other? And how can we tune in together, reconcile? I see that again and again. I think the lone wolves, they have probably become obsolete these days. It's really about togetherness and teamwork to complement each other, to draw attention to the weak points. And as a victim of a weak point, though we never have any, also being able to admit that to myself and others, and somehow looking at chemistry, how does that work together? I can't admit it to them because there's a strong ego. It's easier with the other person. Here, I also think navigating through life and looking for these alliances is something worthwhile. And how do I go about it? People don't just fall out of the sky. I'm involved in the structure somewhere in my job, how I went into the basic training, the apprenticeship, study, whatever. How would I do that? What advice can you give us? So I actually always recommend this analysis of your own voice as a first step, because our voice expresses our character and personality. Personari, this word, we had that very briefly in another program. This word, personari, means I sound through. And for me, the decisive factor when I say how I would look to sort myself is that I'm clear with myself first, so in harmony with myself. Because as long as I don't know how I function, I'll also meet lots of people who don't know either, how they work, and disappointments are actually inevitable. So that means that when I have clarity for myself about how I am, what I want to be, then something wonderful happens. Then suddenly I can be who I am. And that means there will always be ego games. So they're always there. We have an ego, that's our consciousness, that's all fine too. You have to live with that sometimes. But actually, if I can detach myself from that for a large part of my life, then I can just be the way I am. Then I become authentic. Then I have integrity. That is, I'll then say exactly what I mean. Much more often. Integrity is not honest, but it goes much further than honesty. So honesty means I'm wearing a brown jacket today. But if I say I'll wear the brown jacket again tomorrow, it means I'll really wear it tomorrow. That's integrity. And people who know how they work, what their character is, usually have higher integrity. And that makes me much more valuable to other people, because you can rely on me, because I can also assess myself. And if I'm not structured, for example, it's the case with me, I have a basic structure but not very pronounced. Now my colleagues know that I often have to be reminded of things. So if you talk to me, then I forget it again because I have so many great ideas. I drive for 3 hours and then I have 10 new ideas. Now this is a weakness, but there is clarity about it in my environment. And that means my colleagues know that's how I function and aren't upset because they can accept it. I'm also not upset when people keep pointing things out to me and then I try to actually have a certain structure. But I'm not upset when, for example, my employees say to me, or my colleagues say, Josua, now you've forgotten something again, now make an effort that we'll get this done tomorrow. And then it's okay with me because I know my weakness and they know it too, and we know what to expect from each other. And that would be the idea behind my character development. And again, also here, it's about teamwork, about letting the other person do their own things or recognize them. And, well, you said it so beautifully. You don't get annoyed when you're reminded of it, but you see in the big whole context, it just helps both you or the company or whatever the goal, your current mission is. Exactly. Where would you put the term authenticity? Were we close already? Oh, basically, yeah. I think it's a term that's been cannibalized a lot in recent years. So it's good that we clarify it now. Authenticity actually means, if I'm authentic, then I'm the same on the outside as I am on the inside. And that means I wouldn't pretend to be different in any way, but rather I'm just Josua, and when we both see each other, I'm Josua. In my company, I'm Josua. In my relationship with Simone, my wife, I'm Josua. When I walk my dog alone, I'm Josua too. I'd always behave identically, authentically. And that's actually given to everyone, because inauthentic behavior is actually very exhausting, because then you kind of build up ego masks, and then you're someone different at work, then you're at home. The role actor. Exactly, it's acting, and that's extremely tiring. And being authentic really just means that I found myself, and through analysing the voice, I find myself, then I know who I am, and then I can just be who I am. And everyone else will even love me for it. There's a beautiful saying. When I really find myself, when I move towards my harmony, then first and foremost I have the opportunity to love myself. And if I love myself just the way I am, whether I'm fat, skinny, old, whether I have hair or no hair, whether I'm black or white or green or blue, whether I speak with dialect or not, if I love myself like I am, now, in the moment, now comes a cool saying, then everyone else can do as they like. And that also needs a certain courage and probably a certain experience, maturity, to live out your true self and authenticity. Speaking of character and personality, something was going through my head right now. Can I be authentic or live authentically in such a way that I live my personality? Can that be linked or... Yeah, exactly. That's actually how I would break it down. Maybe we go again a level below on the character. If I know what my character is, then I can live my personality, and when I live my personality, I am authentic. And that would be the chain reaction for me. So a completely different term. Where would you classify brainwash here? I would actually give brainwashing a very high priority. Now, that's a bit provocative again, but I would say mental hygiene, which I practice myself, is excessively important. Most of us get up in the morning, shower, brush our teeth, do personal hygiene, and then we kind of sit down for an hour or two a day and tune into YouTube, TV shows and stuff like that. That would be like taking a shower with Coca-Cola in the morning, so nothing against Coca-Cola. But if you imagine taking a shower with Coke, how would that feel? And I'm sorry if I speak against mainstream media and say clearly that's a Coca-Cola shower for the brain. So brainwashing is always extremely negative for us. That means we're brainwashed into perspectives. That's of course also possible, but actually I'm not externally brainwashed at all if I take care of my mental hygiene myself. And this is best done on a non-verbal level. If I know my character, for example, then there's a tone, there's a bass tone, which is the centre of my character. If I actively engage in this tone for just 10 minutes a day by sounding it, ancient Indian knowledge, then I clean my entire system. And if I do that for a few weeks, I can't take it anymore to watch silly TV shows. But then I'm actually only able to let more cleanliness into my life because I clean myself up. It's a beautiful effect. I lose fears, I strengthen my character, I'm becoming more and more valuable to other people because they notice that I am in my centre, as the Chinese or the Asians say so beautifully. I'd like to chime in here for a moment. It's no longer directly in the context of our topic, but with the frequency, does every person have their own frequency? Exactly. And does it come from that? You mentioned Indian. Does that mantra singing come from that as well? That's it, exactly. It's very, very old knowledge. So, like I said, we have records that go back about 3,000 years. But in India itself, I got to know many spiritual teachers there, doctors who say that this knowledge is much older, which I actually believe. Yeah, Josua, where can we get further information? So I'd really recommend anyone who wants to get to know themselves better to analyse their voice. The voice, the sound of my personality. This is possible free of charge using a small app which we created precisely for this purpose because my wife and I wish that everyone gets to know their bass tone. All you have to do is download this app. You need a smartphone, that's the requirement, and if I have this app, then I can determine my bass tone and get a look behind the mirror of my personality to the essence. This app is called Voice, which is spelled Wooyce. If you'd like to read this on a website, just go to voice.com. That's where we describe it. That's where we also have the link to the stores, and then the willing listener simply can get the app and see what tone they are in and what qualities characterize them. And we wish everyone to do that. Thank you very much, Josua, for this wonderful conversation. I'm already looking forward to the next one. Thank you. Dear viewers, this conversation speaks for itself. Have the courage, be authentic. Further information and contact details for our guests can be found on our website. Thank you for your interest and check back with us soon. See you. I look forward to seeing you.